Introduction to Philosophy, Lecture 16, Aquinas Cosmological Argument. Our text provides a selection from Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologiae that briefly sketches numerous God-related arguments. In this lecture, I'll briefly run down some of these sketches leading up to a more detailed discussion of Aquinas' 5 ways to prove the existence of God that conclude this chapter of our text. The first of these brief sketches covers a series of claims about the self-evident existence of God. Notice that Aquinas does not say that this self-evidence is easily understood. Some theologians maintain that everyone has a conception of God, but not necessarily a clear one. So, they claim, everyone has implanted knowledge of God, even atheists, but some of our conceptions are more confused than others. Presumably, we can clear this up with natural theology. Aristotle, who Aquinas refers to as the philosopher, is also invoked for his insights that we can infer conclusions from immediate premises without having to justify them with prior premises that could regress beyond our ability to discover them. This idea can be applied to the nature of God and the world. Or, as it is written, when the nature of a whole and of a part is known, it is at once recognized that every whole is greater than its part. So, when the concept of God is understood, it becomes evident that God exists. Anselm's ontological argument is used as support here, since if we understand the concept of God as something than which a greater cannot be conceived, we should also see that, since God exists conceptually, he must also exist in reality, since that would be greater than merely existing mentally. The next in this series is a simple yet decisive refutation of relativism. The relativist may say, truth does not exist. However, this is problematic since the claim that truth does not exist is a truth claim. That is, it is true that truth does not exist, which is self-refuting. In the rest of this first series, Aristotle's Metaphysics and the Book of Psalms are referred to before a discussion of things that are self-evident in themselves, though not to us, and things that are self-evident in themselves and to us. The first way is when something is self-evident in itself, meaning that it is obvious and clear on its own, even if we don't understand it. The second way is when something is self-evident both in itself and to us, meaning that it is clear and obvious to us because we understand it. A proposition is a statement that we can either prove or disprove, and a self-evident proposition is one that is immediately clear and understandable without needing to be proven or explained. For example, the statement, man is an animal, is self-evident because the idea of animal is already contained within the idea of man. If we know what man and animal mean, then we automatically understand the proposition, man is an animal. However, if we don't know what the words man and animal mean, then the proposition is not self-evident to us. It might be self-evident in itself, but we don't understand it. The passage then goes on to say that the proposition God exists is self-evident in itself, because the predicate, the word exists, is the same as the subject, God. However, because we don't fully understand what God is, the proposition is not self-evident to us. It needs to be demonstrated or proven by things that we do understand, such as the effects of God's existence. The next series of sketches cover the possibility of demonstrating God's existence. One theme in this series is the idea that God's invisible existence can be deduced from his visual effects in the world. However, it may be objected that God's existence cannot be demonstrated scientifically because demonstration is of the visible, measurable world, whereas faith is of the unseen. Aquinas' response is a reference to the book of Hebrews that confirms the claim that the invisible existence of God can be extrapolated from his visible effects in the world. In the next series, one notable discussion is that of evil. The problem of evil is one we will return to, but this articulation frames it thus. If God is infinite goodness, then any amount of evil would be destroyed. Yet evil exists. Therefore, God does not exist. Again, however, we will return to this problem later. Finally, we reach Aquinas' 5 ways of proving God's existence. The first is the argument from motion. Everything we see that is in motion was set into motion by something else. We look at the clouds from the moving earth and further to the moving planets and expanding galaxies. All of this movement is thought to have its origins in the Big Bang. Now, if there were an infinite regress in causes to the effects of all this motion, then the present motion would never occur if the causes were any distance in the past, since there would be an infinite number of events between any points on an infinite timeline. Therefore, since an infinite regress seems like a metaphysical impossibility, and our best current scientific theories point to a finite regress to the Big Bang, we only have reason to believe that the regression of prior movers ends with an unmoved mover, who is God. The second way is referred to as the argument from efficient cause. The claim that everything that happens or exists has a cause that made it happen or come into existence is referred to as the principle of sufficient reason. Since the universe appears to have come into existence a finite time ago, around 13.8 billion years, its existence must have a cause. Since time and space are thought to have been created with the Big Bang during cosmic inflation, the cause of the Big Bang must have existed outside of time and space. Since God is infinite, God is uncaused, since God always was. And since God exists outside of space and time, God is a viable candidate for the uncaused cause of the Big Bang. The third way is the argument from possibility and necessity. All physical objects in the world could possibly not exist. That is to say, there is nothing logically contradictory about a world in which all of the trees in my neighborhood were never planted, or where my parents never met, and I do not come into existence. Therefore, we are contingent beings. Contrarily, there is no possible world where 2 plus 2 does not equal 4, or where triangles do not have 3 sides. These mathematical truths are therefore necessary. It is impossible for contingent things to always exist, since they come in and out of existence. It is possible for necessary things to always exist. Therefore, if it is possible for contingent things not to be, then at one time there could have been nothing in existence. However, if there were nothing in existence, then there wouldn't be anything in existence now, because things that come into existence only do so if they are brought into existence by something else that already exists. Therefore, it cannot be the case that all things are merely possible or contingent. There must exist something that necessarily exists. Necessarily existing things must be either caused or not. But, as with the impossibility of an infinite regress in causes discussed earlier, there must be an initial necessary thing that causes all others, where the subsequent things are necessarily or merely possible. That initial necessary thing is what we call God. The fourth way is the argument from gradation. By gradation, Aquinas means a series of successive degrees. There are things that exist that are good, and things that exist that are powerful, and some are better and stronger than others. Things can have greater or lesser degrees of goodness and power, so there must exist something with the least goodness and power, but also something with the most. God is the existence of the maximal degree of these qualities and every other perfection. The fifth way is the argument from design. The invisible existence of God can be deduced from the observable effects of God that we see in the natural world. For example, Aquinas points out that non-rational species are able to perform their functions on natural instinct alone, in accordance with God's design. Bees, though non-rational, are able to serve their purpose of providing honey despite how complicated the process is. Plants grow and produce oxygen. Systems like the water cycle sustain the plants, which sustain the animals, which sustain humans, and the cycle of life according to God's design. Throughout nature, we see organization, complexity, and apparent purpose, from the smallest atom to the largest galaxy. Since organization, complexity, and purpose are indications of intelligent design, we can infer from these indications that God is the designer. Reflect on the details of these arguments as they're presented here and in our text. Some of the presented ideas will be re-examined, challenged, and serve as the foundations for other arguments in later chapters.